also welcome you to tonight's Board of Supervisors forum sponsored by the League of Women Voters and hosted by the Williamsburg Regional Library. As Priscilla mentioned, my name is Michael Fox, and I'll serve as moderator of this evening's forum with the candidates running to represent the Jamestown and Powhatan districts on the Board of Supervisors in James City. On November 5th, as you know, voters in these districts will have an opportunity to choose their supervisor. There'll be two forums tonight. The first up will be candidates for the Jamestown district from now till about 7:50, 7:55 or so, and then the candidates for the Powhatan district from 8 to about 8:50. So the Jamestown district, let's get right to it. I'd like to briefly introduce each of the candidates beginning to the audience's left. And please note this is the only time until the conclusion that you'll be permitted to applaud. So please join me in welcoming these candidates as they're introduced. First, current supervisor, Jim Eisenhower, the Democratic candidate. Mr. Eisenhower is a retired military and began a second career as an airline pilot, flying for both Pan Am and Delta until 2005. He has served on the board since 2005. Please welcome Mr. Eisenhower. Next is the Republican candidate, Mr. Kevin Onizuk. He is a branch manager and mortgage loan officer for Westar Mortgage and a veteran of the Delaware Army National Guard. Please welcome Mr. Onizuk. Okay, the format for tonight's forum is as follows. I'll ask 6 questions, the same question to each of the candidates. Each candidate will be given 1 minute to respond, with the candidate taking the question first, also having an opportunity for a 30-second rebuttal. And I'll rotate the questions among the candidates. I'd then like to, if possible, ask as many written questions as possible from the audience. During that time, again, each candidate will have 1 minute to respond to those questions, but we'll not do any rebuttals during that time, so we try to get as many questions in as possible. And again, I'll do my best to try and rotate among the two of them and keep track of that. I would encourage you to write questions, I think, on the cards that are provided by the League. Is that right, Priscilla?
We have very lucky to have Key Club students from Jamestown High School here. And they just raise your hand and they would be very glad to give you a piece of paper and a small pencil. It's not a paper, and you could write your questions, and then when you're ready to hand it, raise your hand again, and they will bring them to the two individuals in the back that will screen the questions, and they'll bring them up to the moderator. We're going to keep them busy.
Thanks, Priscilla. Again, I'm only going to ask questions that can be asked of each of the candidates. I will not ask written attack questions. And as moderator, I have the right to rephrase any written question. For closing statements, candidates will each have 2 minutes. The time is going to be kept in front by Ms. Amanda Johnston from the League. Ms. Johnston will give candidates a 15-second yellow sign warning. Do you want to hold that up? There we go. And then a red sign to stop. And based on a coin toss we had before the forum, Mr. Onizuk is going to begin with the first question, and as a result, he will also go last with the 2-minute conclusions. So we'll start with Mr. Onizuk, the first question. The comprehensive plan is coming up for required review next year. Do you support a review of areas previously identified for residential growth, as well as perhaps modifying the current primary services area and the limitations on development outside this area?
It is always good to complete a review whenever it comes up. Growth is of critical importance in our community, and as I go door to door and talk to residents, it's one of their primary concerns. The PSA was established to keep growth within a limited area, and to ensure that we manage our growth, I believe we need to stick to our PSA. We've made some exceptions in the past and ignored others. It seems that sometimes we played a little favoritism in who we grant to go outside of the PSA. So I am a believer in the PSA. I believe in managing our growth and maintaining the charm and personality of James City County. My family and I moved here because of the attractiveness of this county, and we intend to keep it that way.
Mr. Eisenhower, same question. Do you support a review of areas previously identified for residential growth, as well as perhaps modifying the current PSA?
The comp plan is the primary chance for the public to become involved in how you want your county to look. This is the document that should be citizen-based, that tells us what you want your community to look like 20 years out. And when we do these periodic reviews every 5 years, it is the ideal time to review all aspects. I think landowners have an obligation, if they want to have their land designation changed, to bring it forward at that time. I think the Planning Commission, the staff, and the board have done a very good job of reviewing all that in the past. When it comes right down to it, I will agree with Mr. Onazuk that that is the one thing that I think that the PSA should be maintained, the integrity of that should be maintained, and there should only be changes to it for very, very good reasons that are broadly supported by the community.
Mr. Onazuk, you have 30 seconds if you'd like to offer anything else.
The comprehensive plan is a great opportunity for citizens not only to have input in the future of the county, but to know what is coming within the county. When we collaborate and have a solid comprehensive plan, there's not questions within the citizenship of what is the expectation, who will be moving in next to your property, and that brings a lot of comfort to our citizenry. The comprehensive plan is important, we need to keep it in place, and then we need to stick to it as a Board of Supervisors. If we do not live up to our comprehensive plan, then we are not serving the needs of our citizens.
Thank you. Thanks for following all the times to start off with, too. Appreciate that. Second question, Mr. Eisenhower, we'll start with you. Should local revenues become insufficient for current levels of service, is there an instance when you would vote to raise the real estate tax, or instead would you support cutting services? And if the latter, could you give us an example of a service you would cut?
I think the answer to that is very clear. We took a look at that when we started on the economic downturn recently. The first thing we did when we saw our revenues decreasing was to tighten our belts, and we tightened our belts quite dramatically. We cut back on manning, we cut back on expenditures, we deferred capital projects, and we rank order things. Some of the things that are nice to have, like Parks and Rec, are the ones that have to go off the table first. The ones that are essential for our community, like the schools and the fire and police, are ones that have to be funded. So I would try to do everything we could to provide the services that we absolutely require with the resources that are available, and then only when you are getting to the point where you need to fund critical services would you consider trying to find the other sources of revenue to fund it.
Mr. Onazuk, same question. Is there ever an instance when you'd vote to raise the real estate tax, or instead do you support cutting services? And if it is the latter, could you give an example of a service that you would cut?
Certainly. Raising real estate taxes would always be a last resort. As a business owner, when you start to run low on money, you don't just raise your prices. Within the county, belt tightening, as Mr. Eisenhower mentioned, is the most important, and in the last 2 years, I haven't seen that. When the Republicans took over in 2008, there were belt tightening. There were savings put in place. The last couple of years, we have not been honoring that. We need to get value for our investments within the county. If we look at expenditures that we have completed, take a look at the county office buildings. We have built an elaborate office building with etched glass boardrooms, 9 flat screen TVs, an executive suite with a shower. My nationwide mortgage company certainly does not have anything like that. When we got our county administrator from Miami, I didn't realize his new office was going to be like something out of CSI Miami.
Mr. Eisenhower, you have 30 seconds.
We've had a pretty interesting last 5 or 6 years. If you look at the actual expenditures, our per capita spending is down about 16%, and our manning is down about 10%. And that's something that a lot of other communities weren't able to do. We basically have taken an old building and rehabbed it And you should have seen the one we were in before. When the termites quit holding hands, that's when we got rid of it.
Ms. Ron, a question to start with you this time. It deals in essence with another revenue question, specifically about a middle school. Do you believe the need exists for a new or renovated middle school in the county? Please, if you'd specifically explain your position on that, and how would you involve the public in the decision?
I have a very vested interest in this topic. I've got 3 kids in the public school system, including one in middle school right now and one coming up soon behind. I think years ago we did some poor planning. We knew we were going to have capacity issues. We knew we were going to continue to have growth within the county. So now we do have middle school capacity challenges. The school board is starting to step back a little bit and think about what we can do with our existing capacity within the school system. I think we need to take our time on this decision. If we rush into decisions, that's when we end up spending too much money. We need to look at public-private partnerships and other options to invest in new schools and not have the Cadillac. We can have a very functioning Toyota. We need to keep the money out of the fancy buildings, the upgraded drainage systems, and keep it in the classrooms. We need to fund our teachers and our students and keep the money in the education where it needs to be at the bottom.
Mr. Eisenhower, your position on a new or renovated middle school, if you could explain it, and how would you involve the public in the process?
I think the public will be very definitely involved as we go through our budgeting process and look at this. We're on a fairly tight timeline because the need is there, clearly demonstrated for the school. We're going to have that middle school, and whether we renovate the existing school or whether we build a new school, the one thing I would say is that we do need to have a plan that meets the instructional requirements and needs of the 21st century. We ought to own it, and we ought to be able to replicate it. I don't want to keep paying architects' fees for these soaring atriums every time we build one of these things. With that said, I would like to put more of our money into the hindquarters as opposed to the headquarters. Good old military adage. We need that money put into the classroom where it affects the students, and I think we ought to be looking to conserve and be very judicious with our money when we were talking about administrative buildings.
Mr. Onizek?
Citizen input is critical. As a parent, I am certainly a citizen and want input of what's coming into the schools, and we've done that. We've certainly reached out and citizens have had input. A new school at the James Blair location, renovating the James Blair School, those are definite possibilities, but I think we need to look outside of that. That was in the news today. The school board is also following that general line of thought. We need to make intelligent decisions, get value for our new school building, and make sure that we are keeping the funds in the classroom.
Mr. Eisenhower, did you support the transportation bill approved by the Governor and General Assembly earlier this year? In addition to the widening of I-64, what's the most important transportation issue to address in the county now, and how should it be paid for?
Well, yes, I support the bill. I think we definitely have problems with transportation on the peninsula. If we don't get the I-64 widening taken care of, it will adversely affect our ability to attract and retain good businesses. It will hurt us in the tourism business. It's just something that we actually have to do, and it's not the best bill in the world, but it's the best compromise we were able to come up with. As far as local, the number one priority for me right now is the Long Hill Corridor. If you've ever gone out at Route 199 about 5 o'clock in the afternoon and see how traffic backs up from Long Hill all the way back across 199, that's an area where we need to be looking at it very carefully. We also have several other areas like the lights on Monticello Avenue and some of the sequencing of lights projects that we need to get them to work on 199.
Mr. Onizek, same question. Did you support the bill approved by the Governor and General Assembly, and what's your number one transportation priority project for the county?
Transportation to this area is very important. On the Board of Supervisors, we don't necessarily have much other than some input and opinion. It is not our decision, but it is important for businesses and tourists who want to come to this area. Tourism is a very important revenue opportunity for our county. And we need to make sure that we are managing the ability for folks to come here and for businesses to locate here and grow here at James City County. Within the county, very close and near and dear to me is Monticello Avenue. I live in Monticello Woods, right off Monticello, and I've seen a tremendous change in the traffic patterns. We are growing that area by leaps and bounds, primarily in retail space. We need to focus on how to keep that a passable area and a livable area so we don't have another Denby Boulevard or Jefferson Avenue on Monticello.
Mr. Eisner, you have 30 seconds for a rebuttal or follow-up.
I couldn't agree more about trying to keep it from becoming another Denby or another Jefferson Avenue. Unfortunately, there was an opportunity when the board had this new town before it back in 1997 to have provided a better transportation corridor with an additional lane. We're paying the price for that right now. We're also paying the price for a very poor decision to cut Ironbound. It should have been allowed to continue under the 199. It may have been a little more expensive at the time, but that has contributed to a lot of the problems we have in the district.
Mr. Imus, I'm going to start the next question with you, but if there are any written questions that you have, if you could bring them down to me so I can start to go through those with just a couple of questions that I have left. Again, Mr. Onizek, if any citizen attends or happens to be watching a board meeting, inevitably disagreement results in some exchanges among board members, and party line votes are common. One of you has been involved in these exchanges and divided votes, and the other is running as a representative of the party on the other side of these votes. What has happened, and has the advent of party labels resulted in this discord, and how will you work to transcend this discord if elected?
Watching the Board of Supervisors meetings, there is a lot of discord. There is a lot of disagreement. You sit back and it almost looks like we have our own Washington, D.C. Congress on our local Board of Supervisors. Bringing civility back to the Board of Supervisors is very simple. I live it in my everyday life. I don't need a piece of paper to tell me that returning a phone call or returning an email is courteous. When I speak with someone, it's in a courteous manner. I am in a sales position. I work with realtors and home buyers every single day. Working together and being civil is leadership by example. As a member of the Board of Supervisors, I will not think of myself as a Republican or a Democrat. The current majority often votes in lockstep with each other. The minority does not. They often disagree and vote separately. I will not vote along party lines. I do not consider myself a party individual. I will do what's right for the citizens of James City County. I will make an intelligent decision based on the facts of any issues that come before the board.
Mr. Eisenhower, same question about discord on the board. What has happened, and has party labels resulted in this discord, and what will you do to transcend what takes place now?
Well, I think that if it were as simple as one person deciding that we were going to have civility, it would have happened a long time ago. In this case, it requires at least two. Actually, it requires five. And that means that it's more than a one-way street, it's a multi-way street. There has to be communication. You have to be able to listen to the other people's argument. Doesn't necessarily mean that you were swayed by the validity of the argument, but you need to give it good hearing. And then you need to make a basic judgment. Sometimes the contention comes after you've done that. And because you didn't vote the way somebody thought you ought to vote, it becomes contentious. I would disagree that there are some of these issues about split votes. I've had many split votes with Mr. McGlennon. I've had many split votes with Mr. Kale and with Mr. Bradshaw. If you go back and take a look at the record, it's only the highlights that come out that way.
Mr. Onizek, you have 30 seconds.
I respectfully disagree with my opponent in that one person can make a difference, because in watching the Board of Supervisors meetings in person and online on TV, I have seen a decline in the civility of the Board of Supervisors. And unfortunately, it's been since my opponent has been a part of the Board of Supervisors. There was a lot of contention, there was a lot of discourse, and one person can make a difference. 2 people can make a bigger difference. That's why we need change in new leadership in the Board of Supervisors on November 5th.
Just, I'm going to not follow my own rule here and just follow up with, I don't think, a question that you answered. So maybe a minute to each of you are on party labels and running as party members. Mr. Onizuk, your position on running as a party with a party label?
On the ballots, it does not identify us as Democrat or Republican. But we are both backed by a political party that most represents our viewpoints. I've identified more closely with the Republican Party because I am a fiscal conservative. I believe in smart spending and getting value for the money, value for the dollar for our citizens. I believe in keeping real estate taxes low, and I believe in the benefits of a tight budget and making sure that we are managing the funds that have been entrusted to us from our citizens. If that makes me a Republican, then I am proud to be a Republican, but I am here not as a Republican, not as a Democrat, but as a citizen of James City County. We are neighbors. We don't need to label ourselves. When I see you in Martin's grocery store the next day after the Board of Supervisors meeting, I am your neighbor, I am your friend, I am not a Democrat or Republican, and I don't think that needs to be a part of the contention on our Board of Supervisors.
Mr. Eisenhower, your position on running with a party label?
I would love to see what happens in about 50% of our counties where people by mutual agreement run as independents. About half of the supervisors in this Commonwealth do that, mostly in the rural areas. I don't think the party labels are very helpful at the local level. I think that if you take a look at my campaign literature, it does not identify me as a Democrat. And it's for a very specific reason. It's because I'm not out representing just Democrats. When people ask me, I tell them. What I want them to do is I want them to analyze my position on issues and make the judgment on the individual and on the issues, not on constraints. When I look at why I am running as a Democrat, I used to be a Republican many years ago. One of the things I tell people is that currently the Democratic Party here locally allows me to better represent my constituents without the constraint of some ideology that would make it difficult to do otherwise.
All right, we'll get back on track with question and rebuttal now with my last question that I have. And Mr. Eisenhower, I'll start with you. Having listened to some of the arguments so far in this debate, there are certainly clear differences. What do you think is the principal difference between you and your opponent, and why are you better qualified to serve on the board?
My opponent and I probably have some things in common. I think our approach toward growth is probably pretty consistent. When I first ran for the board years ago, it was on the growth issue, and it found a very strong resonating chord in the community because our growth was happening way too fast, and people knew it, and they needed to do something about it. I think that where we maybe disagree on some things is the method you go about controlling this. I believe that we need to keep our taxes as low as possible, but if you don't control growth, you're not going to be able to control taxes. People have to understand that the previous boards have put 15,000 homes on the books out there. They cost money, and the estimates were that they would generate a lot more tax revenue than they're going to generate now. So somewhere we're going to have to pay the bill, and it's coming due.
Mr. Onizuk, differences with your opponent, and why are you better qualified to serve on the board?
I'm running for some new leadership for James City County. I have a vested interest in the future of this county for myself and for my kids. I want them not only to get a quality education here, but be able to stay here upon graduation, to be able to find a good paying job, to be able to find affordable housing. That's not easy to do. A lot of our young people have to leave to find those things. I see it every day in my business. Affordable housing is a challenge in this area. The future of James City County long term is critically important to me. Fiscal responsibility so we don't shoulder our kids with excessive amounts of debt or burdens for some of these big ticket items that we do have coming up. If we keep electing the same people, we will keep getting the same results. I believe in new leadership a long-term focus for our county and making sure that this stays not only an attractive place to live, but an affordable place to live.
Mr. Eisenhower, 30 seconds.
I would say that we can disagree a little bit here. The affordable housing issue is one that is very interesting because one would think that as a Republican, my opponent would be very inclined to let the market make the decision. And this is one of those cases where the market has made its decision. It doesn't do it. It takes government policy to make sure that this happens. And we have a pretty active policy, and we've tried to get that involved in the county. Sorry, time's up.
Lots of written questions that have come up, and I'll start to answer those as best I can. And again, we'll rotate these, and these will be without rebuttal opportunities, and I'll try to stick in the rotating order and keep to that. Lots of questions, Mr. Onizuk, on stormwater issues, particularly reinstatement of the stormwater tax. Your position on that?
Like the majority of citizens in James City County, I am not for a stormwater tax. The citizens of James City County have overwhelmingly voted against it, despite many attempts of supervisor members to try to bring it back to the table. We don't want it. We need to manage stormwater out of our general fund. It is an important issue and a potentially very expensive issue for our county as a whole and even within individual neighborhoods. We're having challenges within my neighborhood with potential stormwater costs and expenses going forward. We need to fund our stormwater out of our general fund. We need to make sure that when we have reserves left at the end of the year, we're not looking at ways to spend that money and to grow government. We are putting it away. It's a rainy day fund. We need the rainy day fund, not the rain tax. Making sure that we are diligent with our citizens' money and is the most important thing.
Mr. Eisenhower?
When we had the stormwater utility, that was one of the few things that the Commonwealth gave us the ability to raise revenue by other means than the property tax. The good thing about that was when we applied that based upon impervious cover, business covered about 50% of the cost and residents covered about 50% of the cost. When we did away with it and went back to property assessments, if we were going to take the money out of property assessments, that burden shifted to 75% for homeowners and 25% for businesses. So by doing away with it, we would have normally stuck the homeowner. We used to raise $2.8 million with that fee, $4.95, I believe it was, per house per month, about $60 a year. In order to, if we were going to do away with the fee, which was fine, and we were going to fund it at the same level, we should have turned around and said we're going to designate 2 to 3 cents of the tax rate to provide $2.8 million worth of money to do these projects. We didn't. We barely putting $700,000 into it. Projects are put off, and we're at the end of our rope with the EPA.
Mr. Eisenhower, a question about the Labor Day law. Would you support the Williamsburg-James City County school system seeking a waiver to allow schools in the area to start before Labor Day?
Yes, I would. I know that there are some aspects of that probably go back to the agricultural days of the community. Nowadays, it's probably more based upon tourism and the fact that the tourist season requires so many of our young people to man some of these things. But I think it would probably be much better from an educational standpoint if we at least allowed our schools the opportunity to do that.
Mr. Onizuk?
The school starting after Labor Day, I think, as you all mentioned, is important for tourism for our area. As a parent, it has not been an issue for myself and my family. School starting after Labor Day seems to be traditional for this area. If our school board felt it was necessary, that's a school board issue. It's not necessarily something that would be decided by the Board of Supervisors. It should be decided by the school board in what's in the best interest of our students and our community. I don't necessarily have any problem with it the way it is. And if we need that to support our local tourism, Busch Gardens, Water Country, Colonial Williamsburg, and keeping people coming to this area, so be it.
Mr. Onzik, start with you. A couple written questions, I guess, on citizens addressing the Board of Supervisors and whether or not there should be any additional restrictions placed on citizens who address the board.
Unlike my opponent, I do not feel there should be restrictions on citizens addressing the board. If folks want to come in and have their say, so be it. I don't think it should be pushed online. I don't think we should be spending thousands of dollars of citizen money to have them go to a website to voice their opinions. As a supervisor, call me, shoot me an email. I will be available. In my job, if I don't answer the phone, they call someone else. A supervisor needs to be not only responsive directly to their citizens on a regular basis, which I will be, but at a Board of Supervisors meeting, we are there to hear from the citizens and learn from the citizens. I get concerned when I'm at Board of Supervisors meetings. I hear an overwhelming outcry from the citizens for a certain issue, and the Board of Supervisors votes a completely different way. Look at the Peninsula Pentecostal Church. Unbelievable. I wanted to cry for those folks at that meeting.
Mr. Eisenhower?
Unlike my opponent, I also don't believe that we should restrict people's opportunity to speak before the board. We have a policy at the board that allows public comment. And under the law in Virginia, we don't have to do that. We're not required to allow public comment. But we did. And we not only that, we increased it to twice during the meeting instead of once, as it used to be. It is the way it is. People like it, and there is no reason or need to change it. I think that everybody ought to have the opportunity to come out and speak as much as they want on that, even if it's going to keep us up until 2 in the morning. If they want to do it, we're game. I think that the idea of using something online to help supplement for people who are not able to attend and allow other people to give input would be very, very helpful. The other answer to your question is you represent all of the people in this community, not just the ones that show up at the meeting, not just the ones who speak the loudest. So you have to take everybody into consideration.
Several questions that were on that last, or several written questions on that last question that I asked. Mr. Eisenhower, fairly straightforward question from someone. Does York County do enough to support financially the Williamsburg-James City County services? Does York County do enough, I guess, in its financial contributions to support services in the Williamsburg-James City County area?
Well, yeah, with the big place there's been some contention, of course, has been the library, and that has been recently worked out. But for the most part, our collaboration is with the city of Williamsburg, and to the extent we have it with York, I think they probably do a pretty good job. Where we could use some improvement, I think, in collaboration is talking to each other about what we're planning to develop next to each other.
Mr. Onzik, York County question, do they do enough financially to support services here in Williamsburg, James City County?
I would concur with Mr. Eisenhower. Where we do have collaboration, it does go well, and I support that. If there is other ways we can collaborate for future savings, I think that's fantastic. We need to work with our neighbors. We work together for tourism. We are the historic triangle. So if we can work together to encourage folks to visit and to have cost savings for our citizens, I think that's fantastic. So yes, I think York County certainly carries its weight, and the partnership with York County, the City of Williamsburg, and James City County needs to continue.
A light question for you both to maybe lighten up the evening. This is often a question that the league answers at its debates. Mr. Onzik, what was the last book that you've read, if you've had time to read a book recently, and why did you choose that book?
Reading books certainly has been a luxury lately, but the last one I've read was Animal Farm. And I read that because my 9th grader was reading it as a school assignment. So I chose, to her annoyance, to read that along with her. So as she read a chapter, I read a chapter, and then would discuss it with her. Being a teenage girl, that wasn't her favorite thing, to talk about the political impact of socialism and the socioeconomic impact of the Animal Farm premise. But I chose it because my daughter was reading it in school, and I thought that was a good way to connect with her, and it was a good, very topical book.
Thanks for that. Mr. Eisenhower, have you had time to read a book recently, too?
Well, it's on my nightstand. I'm about halfway through it. I probably won't finish it until after the campaign. But my wife worked at the bookstore for Williamsburg, for Colonial Williamsburg for many years, and so she always brings me really good books. She brought me one and got me interested. I read it, and I'm now on the third of that 3 set, and that's, I believe the gentleman's name is Atkinson. It's An Army at Dawn, Day of Battle, and the final battle, I think, something like that. It's a trilogy written on the World War II in Europe. And it is probably the most detailed, phenomenal book that I think I've ever read. It's just one of those things that I couldn't put down until the campaign started.
Mr. Eisenhower, start with you. The issue of land preservation and the use of county taxpayer funds to set aside land banking in the county, your position on that.
This is one of those things, if you go back to the comprehensive plan and listen to what the people told us, about 80% of them said, yeah, we want you to do it. We put it up to a bond referendum a few years back. Again, 78, 79% said, yeah, we want you to do it. We've had the money in the bank for a long time. We've been very remiss in that we didn't get a lot done, but we were really waiting for some pretty good properties. And there are two that I will mention here that came along recently. One is the Carlton Farms, which we purchased the development rights on. And the other one we just did the other night, where we already owned the property, which was Mainland Farm, and we put a permanent conservation easement on it. I'll tell you that these are historically significant and culturally significant pieces that I think our citizens want us to protect. There is also a financial aspect to it. If you take a piece of land like that and you carve it up into quarter-acre lots, each one of those houses costs us about $1,000 a year more in services than it produces in revenues. And you project that out over 30 or 40 years, and you've got a lot of money.
Sean, is that?
A lot of money is correct, and we've spent a lot of money on land development, and the citizens voted for that. We need to preserve the beauty of James City County and the historic aspect of our county. I don't think anyone disagrees with that. We just need to make sure that we are making smart purchases. There's purchases that I disagree with, such as the Allen property. We spent over $1 million, about $1.2, $1.3 million on property that is questionable if it could have ever even been developed. The way that property is set up, it's zoned A1 agricultural, so it would have to be divided into 3-acre parcels or larger. It is not economically feasible to develop that property, putting in water, sewer. It would cost a fortune for that property to ever be developed. We need to focus on our needs. Wants need to come secondary in our county. We have some major issues, and if we can put off a purchase such as that that's probably not necessary, certainly not pressing, and focus on some of our stormwater and other needs, that's a much better use of our citizens' money.
Mr. Honizik, lots of questions on growth, and I'm not really sure how to boil them down into one question. Perhaps it's just best to maybe look at the Monticello Avenue corridor and the rapid growth of retail along that corridor, and whether or not you have any concerns with the potential failure of those businesses and empty office buildings.
As I knock doors, the number one concern I get from citizens is retail growth and empty retail space. Folks are concerned we have an overabundance of retail space. They see businesses moving from one area over to another one without a lot of new businesses coming. We've built out Newtown where we focused on the retail before the residential, so our businesses there are struggling. It's a huge concern. And out of that, the one people mention most is Settlers Market. It was supported by my opponent. The folks see that those trees have been clear-cut and are gone. They drive up and down Monticello, they're stuck in the traffic, and they see that Walmart, and it's upsetting, and it concerns me too. We do need to protect our county, we do need to control our growth, and retail is a huge concern for our citizens.
Mr. Eisenhower?
I'll come back to Section 9 right away and remind my opponent that if he goes back and looks at the record, that when it came before the board, I voted against it. When it came back after bankruptcy and they downsized it considerably, I finally voted for it. The other part is that part that was up front was a separate parcel that Walmart had obtained, and that one was out of our board hands. So that one was one we never got a shot at. You know, it's sort of like what happened over in York County when something is already zoned and you don't have a chance for the public to weigh in on it. I was very pleased at the final outcome in Settlers Market because it was much smaller than originally designed, and that for the first time we had stores that were new to the area coming in, and a very minimal number, Steinmart being one, that relocated from other areas around here. One of the things we're going to have to deal with is redevelopment of a couple of other shopping centers that we have to look at going forward. So yes, it's a considerable problem, and a lot of people are concerned about it.
Last written question, and then we'll go to the closing statements. Again, in the closing statements, we'll start with Mr. Eisenhower and finish with Mr. Anazuk. So, Mr. Eisenhower, start with you. I guess there's recently become an issue regarding taking minutes during closed sessions of the board. Your general position on that particular issue?
I've got some basic problems with it because one of the reasons, well, there are several reasons that we go into closed session, and they're established by the Commonwealth under law. And one of them was that when we make personnel decisions, we want to do an evaluation of someone, and we want to do a brutally frank and honest evaluation. That's counterproductive or impossible to do in an open session. When we want to talk about people that we want to appoint to boards and talk about their qualifications, their criteria, what we think about them personally, I feel it is totally inappropriate for us to voice that in public session. That's where we should be in private session, in closed session, and discuss that, and then come out and take our vote in public on the issue at hand. You know, it's one of those that we could do it, but the problem is that it probably would make the value of some of those closed sessions much less useful to the board in the long run.
Mr. Anazuk?
I would support not only minutes, but possibly even recording closed sessions. We need to ensure that what is happening behind closed doors is what Mr. Eisenhower referenced is legally allowable. I am not behind those closed doors, but it has been in the news and argued on the board recently that folks are talking about things that should not be talked about in closed session. Appointments, that's being talked about and argued in an open meeting. Maybe those things should have been discussed recently in a closed session, but I believe in transparency within our Board of Supervisors at every level. Personnel matters should be private. Those such matters should be private, but recorded to make sure that things are accurate so you don't have these he said, she said arguments after the fact.
Closing statements, 2 minutes each, beginning with Mr. Eisenhower.
The one thing I've noticed in dealing with people in this county over the last 8 years is that they all have a common goal, and that is they want to preserve the unique rural and historical heritage of our county. They don't want us to destroy the qualities that attracted them to this community. 80% of them support that position, and that transcends party lines. That's a public issue, not a party issue. So if we're going to achieve that goal for all of our citizens, we need to have a blueprint for the future. And there are three interrelated factors I think that we have to deal with. Number one, we have to control growth. The national average growth rate of 1% is a good place to start. I would shoot for a target of about 1 to 2%, which gives us good, healthy growth, which is necessary for our economy. What we don't want is the continuation of the last 20 years of 3 to 4%, which doubles our population and strains our resources. We need to keep taxes low. New growth should pay for itself. If it doesn't, we all pay more for it. We can't continue the taxpayer-subsidized developer welfare program that we've had in the past decades. We need to diversify our economy with using our enterprise and technology zones and business incubator to grow our business tax base and decrease our reliance on property taxes. We can't keep taxes low if we can't control growth and diversify the economy. Now, there's been a lot of political rhetoric about the county's fiscal state, and here are the facts. Since 2007, our debt is down 22%. Per capita spending is down 16%. County manpower is down 10%. And in recent years, we've had $1 to $3 million surpluses on balanced budgets. This year, we fully funded all essential services without a tax rate increase, and real estate tax bills were down about 5%, all while maintaining a $20 million reserve and a AAA bond rating. That's something no other local government in the peninsula has done. We are a well-managed, fiscally responsible local government that is smaller, leaner, and more efficient. I am seeking re-election to continue that trend.
Mr. Onizuk.
I want to thank the League for sponsoring this debate. When things stay the same, they aren't getting better. We can't expect civility to return to government if we re-elect the same people who've been fighting with one another for so long. We can't expect county government spending under control if we're rewarding management within the county with golden parachutes. And we can't expect an open and transparent government when the current majority resorts to closed sessions they refuse to record. Mr. Eisenhower has had 8 long years on the board, and civility is at an all-time low. The 2008 to 2011 Republican majority reduced our county's debt from the 2007 record high, but Mr. Eisenhower has been busy with our county credit card over the last 2 years. Mr. Eisenhower is part of the problem. I offer solutions in a very different perspective. I am raising my family in James City County by choice. As a homeowner with 3 children in the public schools, I have an enormous personal interest in the cost of living and the quality of core services provided by local government. Keeping county spending under control, ensuring a vibrant local economy that is citizen and business friendly, and preserving our county's natural beauty will be my focus on the Board of Supervisors. I am Kevin Onizuk, and to bring the change we need, I ask for your vote on November 5th. Thank you.
On behalf of the League of Women Voters of the Williamsburg area, many thanks to the Regional Library for hosting this first forum of the evening, and to both candidates who participated. I'd like to thank the audience in big numbers for being here, and also to those who may be viewing this program later. If you have questions about your voting district, please check with the James City County Registrar. Please remember to vote on November 5th, and please join me in thanking our candidates from the Jamestown District.